tomorrow. Many of the meetings had been cancelled indefinitely. So don't know when it will resume. It could be 1 month later or many more weeks. There are also many travel restrictions imposed from those that are flying into Singapore, isn't it? If you have been to Germany for the last few days, you will be now under the stay-home order, right? And many things are happening. And many people are fearful of the virus. I appreciate it. I know many of you here are frontline medical workers serving in the various hospitals, pharmacies, clinics, and I want to just ask the Lord to protect you, especially as we meet this changing environment. You know, for the Seventh-day Adventist Church, we have been saying that the world is coming to an end. Since the beginning of our movement, isn't it true? We have been singing the hymn, Jesus is coming soon. And for years I grew up with the hymn. And I asked my father, when is he coming soon? How come he doesn't come? You guys keep singing and singing and singing, but he never appears. Where is he? My father said, just wait. Okay, but if I kept on pressing for the answer, he kind of just slapped me and shut up, just listen. But how is the world like? Can you change to this PowerPoint slide? Yes. What does it mean to you when we say the end of the world? What does it mean to you? Let me just give you a few possible scenarios. If you happen to be at New York City during September 11, 2001, working at the Twin Towers, and you happen to be at the South Tower, the North Tower was hit in the morning at 8:46 a.m. by an unknown mass substance, and there were commotions, confusions, cries, panic, fear, apprehension. And while you were still at the South Tower working for a few moments, and then minutes later, you saw a plane flying right into your office. Does that sound like the end of the world to you? Or perhaps some of you may remember just a couple of years ago on the Boxing Day after Christmas, right at Banda Aceh, you brought your family there for a family vacation, enjoying the sunshine and the beach. And that morning you hear the thunderous roaring waves, several meters high, coming after the beach, and you and your family were running for cover. Does that sound like the end of the world to you? Or perhaps not too long distance ago, maybe about 10, 11 years ago, there was a world major financial crisis. And you invested perhaps in some kind of a mortgage, maybe some kind of a equity, stock shares, and whatever they may be. And they went bust. And you realize that your house that had been on mortgage, a few months later, because you defaulted on the payment, the bank called you and said that you either pay up or you move out. Does that sound like the end of the world to you? If that you were curious to visit China, how many of you have visited China before? Right here in this room. Several of you, right? So maybe you decided to bring your family to China during the Chinese New Year season because there were many holidays. And lo and behold, during the mid of January, of all the cities you have chosen Wuhan. And then you brought your family there for a wonderful family vacation. And then lo and behold, you felt that there was something unusual in the city. And then you were caught off guard. There was a lockdown in the city and you and your family were quarantined in your hotel. And then your little boy crying to you, Daddy, Daddy, I have a fever. And then he was coughing and has respiratory problems. So you decided to bring your little child to the hospital, to bring, not to bring, because the queue into the hospital is several hundred meters long. Does that sound like the end of the world to you? And closer to home, just a few years ago, you have the super typhoon Haiyan, isn't it? That killed almost 7,000 people, 3 billion more and still counting of property that were damaged. And if you happen to have your house, your family at the route of the typhoon, does that sound like the end of the world to you? Just now I appreciate brother here was saying about poverty. Let me tell you, I understand poverty. Some of them say, are you sure, Pastor? I say I grew up in a family of 6. And then I remember, because as a boy I loved bread. And we could only afford 1 loaf of bread with 6 of us. 2 adults, mommy and daddy, and the 4 of us. And my mom would say to me, 2 slices, that's all, Johnny. because you need to keep it for your brother, for your sister. I think Anna and some of you who grew up in Singapore, you remember the days of rationing, water rationing. And Singapore was not, once upon a time, Singapore wasn't what it is today. And water rationing, and you had to take pills to carry water. And there was frequent power blackouts. And then you do halfway, there's no electricity. It's just the whole night it was black. Sounds familiar to some of the areas in the Philippines still today, isn't it? Yes. And then you realize something. When you have nothing, you are not fearful to lose anything. There's nothing much to lose. Isn't it true? But right now, when you are accomplished, you're working in Singapore and you're buying your house in Manila and in all kinds of investment, suddenly you feel that there is a chance that you will lose everything, especially to this little boy called coronavirus or COVID-19. Well, some people just call it more direct Wuhan virus. Okay? Or whatever terminology you want to call it. The point is this. We become very fearful. We get paralyzed. And why is that so? I think sometimes it is interesting that we are fearful that we will lose everything, including our lives. What about the disciples of Jesus? You know, if you have a Bible, I want to encourage you to turn to Matthew 24 and 25. These are the two chapters that are constantly expounded by the scholars, by pastors, by Sabbath school teachers, by many of you. You have read the two chapters because chapter 24 talk about the soon coming of Jesus. And the disciples had the same experience because they heard that Jesus was going away. And they said, hey, Jesus, we thought you are going to establish a kingdom here. An earthly kingdom that would replace the Roman Empire. A new kingdom that will rule the entire world. And perhaps we can be ministers of finance, ministers of economy, ministers of health, ministers of education, and we will be occupying the highest positions in your new sovereign empire. They were afraid that they were losing something that they had been looking and hoping and dreaming that will come true. And so they said, Jesus, okay, even if you are going, how fast will you come back? Just tell us the signs. Then we know you will be back. And so it's only a temporary loss. A temporary gap that I may not have my desire fulfilled. But when you come, it's all done. The disciples came with the intention of Jesus. That's why in Matthew 24, Jesus was telling them that you look at the temple, the city, he said, all these things will be gone. The disciples were shocked, totally astounded. How could it be? Many of you work in Singapore. You cannot imagine, right? Singapore will be gone. Is it possible? If you look at history, it's the best teacher. Many countries and cities around the world, once upon a time, they were just like Singapore. But today, you go to visit these places, they are in total ruin, destruction. It just makes you sad that these beautiful places, once upon a time, they were the cherished heaven for many of them, even the heavenly Canaan. And now, there are places that you would not even go if they give you money, with air tickets and hotels provided. And so, Jesus is trying to remind his disciples and all of us of all successive generations that things will come and go. And that is why the disciples asked Jesus, so when will you come again? Jesus says there will be what? There will be wars, there will be nations against nations, there will be famines and earthquakes. I remember Pastor Igan, during just a few months ago, November, we went for a Bible conference in Ayas, right there beside the division office. And he brought us to the beautiful place of Takatai. And then you can overlook the beautiful lake, isn't it? And then they have a volcano. Is it Ta'al?
Yes.
Okay. And they were pointing out, it's a beautiful place, isn't it? That was about, I think it's March. It's about 4 months ago, right? And then then in January you have the eruption, isn't it? Of volcano. And suddenly, what regarded as high real estate within those areas is like, I'm not sure, right? And now, the volcano has subsided, right? But it may come again. And so, it's very interesting. I don't know, you know the conversation. I was talking to the division officers. They were saying that, Singapore has this COVID-19 very high. The infection rate very high. I said, you watch out at the back end. Because if your volcano erupt, Your old place gone. You will be covered in ashes. I said, oh. I said, actually compared to the COVID-19, it is insignificant, right? As to your back door. By the way, I was told it's not just volcano. Several volcanoes in the area, isn't it? And but you know, if you go back to history of the volcano, it has erupted before. But do you realize something about human memory? We're very selective. We can't forget. And the disciples had the same mentality. So even Israel in the Old Testament has experienced all the ups and downs. They came to Jesus and said that, so what are the signs of coming? And Jesus says that you will see false prophets, false deception, wickedness of human being, love will grow cold. But then he says what? In Matthew 24:14. Many people ask me, Pastor, is the COVID-19 the signs of the end times? Is this the end? I said, no, not at all. This is like watching a movie. This is a thriller. Just a clip to show you more to come. Okay, gigantic. If you think this is bad, I think this is only an appetizer to more to come. And that is why, if you understand from a spirit of prophecy standpoint, that the forces of nature will be so strong that people ask, what happens? And so here, Jesus told the disciples, when will the end will come? See, when what? When the gospel of the kingdom will be preached what? In all the world. Many of you, I thank you today, you speak in English. Normally you speak in Tagalog. Tagalog is more at home. I understand that very well. Okay, I'm a Chinese has different dialects. Many of you work in the hospitals, you got Hokkien, you got Mandarin, you got Cantonese. I'm a Cantonese. It's very interesting. When I count money, if I count in English, it's 1, 2, 3. But I count in Cantonese, that is something, wow, very fast. And very accurate. I think the same thing when you count in your native language is actually more accurate. And when I scold people, if I scold my wife, Cantonese is faster. Come on, words, right? English, there's a delay translation, okay? Calibration. But you want to be raw, you want to be aggressive, you want to hit to the nerve, okay? You speak the mother tongue, right? I understand that, I fully understand that. And here it says that the gospel must be preached to all nations. And then the end shall come. All nations. Then the end shall come. So this is not just about virus. This is about the gospel that will be preached to all the nations, and then the end shall come. Now I just want to just give you just a 1-minute rundown between chapter 24 and 25, because it formed the basis for understanding. Because in chapter 25 of Matthew, you have the parable of the 10 virgins, you have the parable of the sheep and goats, and then you have the parable of the faithful servants. In Matthew 24, the concern is about the signs of his coming. In Matthew 25, it's about preparation for his coming. In Matthew 24, it's about the events of the world. In Matthew 25, it's about the conditions of God's church right here. In Matthew 24, it's about what happens out there in the world. In Matthew 25, what happens right here within God's church. So these two chapters form the basis for our understanding of his soon coming. So if there are wars and rumors and famines and pestilence, these are sure to happen before he comes again. But the real sign of his coming is when the gospel is preached to the whole world, then the end shall come. But what is the gospel? Sometimes the Seventh-day Adventist Church has a hard time even understanding and defining gospel. The gospel is centered on one character. Who is he? Jesus. Without Jesus, there is no good news. And the gospel is about Jesus. It's about his incarnation. He came upon us, lived among us. It is upon his death, crucifixion, that he offers salvation for everyone. And it's about his resurrection that there is hope, that whoever believes in him shall not perish. And today he lives among us, and he will come back to bring us home. That is the essence of the gospel. Repeated throughout the entire New Testament. In every epistle, letter by Paul or by Peter or by the rest of the apostles, they have the same theme, that the gospel is Jesus. So the Seventh-day Adventist doctrines, whether it's our Sabbath, state of the day, second coming, and all our teachings are derivatives from the gospel. So that is the essence of it. That the gospel is always on Jesus. Every doctrine, I asked Pastor Mark Finley many times, but once I always ask him again, I say, how do you explain to so many members about church doctrines? So many doctrines within the church. There is this very simple, Johnny, any doctrine that does not point to Jesus and is not on the basis of Jesus is a waste of time. So all teachings of the church must ultimately point us to Jesus. So, we talk about the three angels message, right? The three angels message by itself is not the gospel. It is the sharing, the propagation, the dissemination of the gospel on steroid, on double mode, on the quickest pace possible. That it is. So the three angels message, if you were to sum up the three angels message, is basically from this phrase. It is a movement from self-worship, worshipping yourself. We live in a very materialistic society, isn't it? It's all about me. And 666 is whose number? If you read the Revelation, it's not just the beast number, it's man's number. It's man's number. What about the man? Because God created man on which day? On the sixth day. It's all about me, I, me, myself. So it is the three angels message in the context is to move us from self-worship to what? To God worship. From being egocentric to God-centric. So that is the essence of the gospel of the transformed life. Very often I think we look at the world and say there's more than 7 billion people in the world. How could the Seventh-day Adventist Church be so arrogant, be so boastful that we can bring the gospel to every kindred, tongue, and people? We could hardly even catch up with the birth of the world every day. Isn't it true? So can the Adventist Church finish the work? Can you and I finish the work? To bring the gospel to every nation. Are you sure? How many Filipinos are there in Singapore? 150? Maybe more? How many of them have even heard about the gospel and the good news of the Seventh-day Adventist Church? We don't need to go back to Philippines. Philippines is a big population. How many? Who will finish the work? Ellen White says, ultimately, God will finish the work. We merely need to be His instrument. It is impossible for the church to think that I can finish the work. No. God will finish the work, and God will use whomever He pleases and who is willing to surrender into His hand. So I think Pastor Igan tried the whole conference having this movement of discipleship. Why? Because we have lost many members. And the goal of discipleship is what? Is transform life to multiplication. It is a transformed life in Jesus. The gospel that must transform our lives, our values, our behavior, our attitudes, everything else. That will lead to what? To spiritual regeneration. Because the good news must be shared. I thought of how do we share the good news with people around us. There are many people who do not know about the message in the scripture. Back then in 1920s, I don't know if you heard of the, have you seen a machine known as a telegraph? They use the Morse code, it's the right? Maybe you watch in movies, documentaries. Back in the 1920s, that's how the telecommunication existed within the framework. And there was a company that was advertising for a Morse code operator. So the Morse code is the system of communication, and the telegraph is the machine that communicates using the Morse code. And so the advertisement was on the newspaper. Several people signed to be interviewed. So on that day, these interviewers, applicants, went to the large busy office filled with noise and clutter, including the sound of the telegraph at the background. And aside the receptionist table, counter basically instructed job applicants to fill up a form and wait until they were summoned to enter the inner office. So these 7 young men were there waiting and fill up the application form. And then another guy came in, young man. He crossed the room, stood down, took the application and filled up. Halfway through his filling, he stood up and he walked into the room for interview. Well, the other 7 who were waiting earlier, they felt, what was this guy doing? He must be crazy. They said, he thought he would get a job. He would be fired. He would be dismissed. So they waited for a while. A couple of minutes later, the employer came out and escorted with this young man who went earlier into the office. And he told all the other applicants, he said, gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. The job has been filled. Wow, you can imagine these 7 other applicants. They were furious. They were shouting that it's not fair. He said, wait a minute, boss. We don't understand. He was the last to come in, and we never got a chance to interview. Yet he got the job. That's not fair. But the employer say, I'm sorry. See, from the time you have been sitting here filling up the application form, the telegraph has been ticking using the Morse code message. And the message reads, sounds like, if you understand the message, then come right in. The job is yours. None of them have understood it, but this young man did. And the same thing I think today, the church needs a lot of spiritual Morse code interpreters. Many of your friends out there, your colleagues, they may be fearful of the virus, they may be fearful of the future, the unknowns. I know in Singapore, many of you, I can understand your predicament because sometimes your employment pass, with all this rising salary range of employment pass, S-pass, E-pass, it has another level of uncertainty. You're not sure how long could you be here, or you're going to another country, and so on and so forth. Would you be going home? There are many factors, variables in your life's equation, and they keep changing according to the circumstances. But one thing that does not change, if your faith in God is constant, if you trust Him, if you know that He has the best for you, then God will lead you through. And same, He wants us that not only we experience His goodness, but He wants us to be spiritual interpreter of the good news that we all had experienced. And if you had not experienced, even though you could be in church for all these years, then I invite you to drink from the water of Jesus, from the well that He says that you will never thirst again, and eat the bread that He gives to you. You know, Jesus says that give us, in the Lord's Prayer, give us this day our daily bread, because bread is the essence of substance. Bread is everything. And when Jesus was first tempted, His reply is, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. And you know what? Jesus is the living bread. And if we take of this spiritual manner of Him, we shall never go hungry again. And that is why I think, because we live in the world of this setup, our mission as a church, as an individual, is to bring the gospel to every kindred tongue and people that has impacted me. It is my testimony. You know, when the Bible says the fullness of time, that the Messiah is born, what does it mean? It means that during the time of the Roman Empire, these Romans were very good architects and engineers. And they built highways across the whole of Asia and Europe. And that is why the fullness of time, when it is said in the Old Testament, the prediction of the coming Messiah, is to say that this is the best time for the gospel to be shared. That's why the apostles could plant churches all over the place. They have the marine, navigation, transportation mode right there in the Mediterranean Sea. And they could travel from place to place, which couldn't be possible just 500 years earlier. And the Romans had allowed that architecture for the gospel, for the New Testament church to be planted in all over the place. And you know what? The Seventh-day Adventist church began with this movement where printed literature, I'm sure in the Philippines, once upon a time, if you grew up in church, they have printed literature disseminated all over the place. Isn't it true? We have publishing houses. By the way, every institutional establishment within the Adventist church, whether it's a school, a hospital, a publishing house, or whether it's a media broadcast or a local church, the ultimate purpose is the same. Is to bring people to Jesus Christ. And ourselves included. And so, the church began with that movement. And then HMS Richard, in the 1920s, began to use radio as part of the communication. The Adventist World Radio as a result, as a subsequent development of that. And today, the Adventist Church uses satellite broadcasts and always and means to disseminate the gospel. And right now, around the globe, we have 55 Hope Channel networks around the world. And Singapore has just established the Hope Channel last year, being the 55th station, I think, 54 or 55th, I think, right of this whole network. And why are we doing that? Because we want to leverage on that. Pastor Egan is always featured there, and we want to have more programs that will link to the local church. That you are invited to participate in this Hope Channel Singapore. Why Singapore? Because I think you know, having worked in Singapore, having stayed in Singapore, you need to contextualize the message. It is different. if you have been a Filipino staying in Singapore for the last 10 years, you are already Singaporeized. Is it true? I just want to say one thing, right? In Philippines, what time do you go to church for Sabbath school? 8. Yeah, 8. I was shocked one time I went to a church, 7:30 already people were there. I said, wow. I said, if this happens in Singapore, there is revival. It's very early, right? But I realized something, after you've been in Singapore for a while, come to church, Pastor, 9:30, very difficult. Isn't it? The pattern. I know some of you you work in the medical field, I understand the concerns. But I'm saying that the habit, the cultures, you realize that, isn't it? And when you have not much to give, you give very generously whatever you have, right? You give to the church. But when you have a lot, you begin to measure, oh, if I return tithe, if I give $1,000 or $200, what can the $200 get me? We begin to be calculating. It's human tendency, and that is why the gospel of Jesus Christ must continue transforming us. So today we're running on the internet bandwidth that is englobing the world, and that is why we have Hope Singapore. We have the Hope Singapore team here: Anandan, Faith, Joash, Simon, and then even Karen. Okay, we have many other who are full-time workers. Some of them are part-time, some are volunteering. They just want to run through with us. Anand, our Hope channel, by the way, is on the 3rd level. One day perhaps we should have a what do you call it? Open house to let you see.
The house is always open.
Sound okay? All right. Glad to be here, people. Yeah. Remember the pastor started with that one slide that said there is hope, and that's true. We have Hope Channel actually. We have had the radio for 27 years, by the way, and we are moving with the times. See, how many of you have a transistor radio with you now? No. Anybody here? No, right? But then, how many have a smartphone? Everybody has a smartphone. So that's why we are making a move towards that. On Hope Channel, we are producing programs that are useful to you. What are these programs for? They are for sharing, actually. It's for you to build yourself up, to give you strength, and also at the same time, to make it possible for you to send it to somebody else, yeah? Now, originally we started with us telling you to go to our website. No lah, it doesn't work very well, yeah? So now we have different methods by which you can come on board, yeah? This is Tree of Life. Of course, you can recognize Pastor Igan there, yeah? Yeah, smiling face. Now, he does his Tree of Life for you, and very nice ones, yeah? Because all of his Tree of Life programs are very down to earth, yeah? And very useful as well. Now, all the other pastors are also involved in this. We have the Tree of Life now in Mandarin. Every Thursday we are releasing one in Mandarin, and the Chinese pastors are helping to do this, yeah? Now, to move on, we have Heart to Heart, which is another program that we are working on. We need your prayers for this one because, you know, every schedule that we have fixed for shooting, turns out somebody falls sick. And so we need for you to pray for us so that, you know, it sounds really funny if 5 shoots are all moved because someone fell sick on that particular day. Doesn't sound right, yeah? Anyway, this one is where 2 people talk to each other. They have a story that they share, in which both of them are involved, yeah? So here we have also Healthy Foodie, which is about good, nice food coming from different places, but which will be featured as well. Now, we have another program which you guys would probably be very interested in. This is Unplugged. It's a music program, a program for singing and so forth. Well, come talk to us if you have some things that can be done, yeah? Now I'm going to call Joash to come on board and let him explain this part to you.
Good afternoon and happy Sabbath. So Anand had explained all the different programs that he just said. So where can you find or get all these programs? We actually have a Hope Channel app. You can download on your Google Play or your Apple, you know. You can use that, download the app and watch it there. You can watch it at our website or YouTube as well. All our content go there. We also have our social media like Instagram or Facebook that you always use. We are also there as well. All the videos can be found there. But during this roadshow, we just launched our Telegram and WhatsApp channel, and that will be easier because then you will get your content on your phone, and you have to go and find and all this will be delivered to you. And we will sign all of you up. In a little while, in the next few slides, I will do an activity to get everyone on board. Okay, so Hope Channel is also looking for volunteers. So we are looking for, if you know anyone who are able to translate Mandarin to English or vice versa, you can always let us know. We are looking for people like that. We are looking also for people who are transcriber, which type out English words through a video and stuff like that. We have script writers we are looking for and photographers at the moment. These are the 4 people we are looking for at the moment. But if you think that you want to use your talent for anything else for Hope Channel, you can always scan the QR code or come talk to us at our booth and we see how we can help you with the talent you have. And next is also, you can also donate to Hope Channel. $250 to $400 actually support one episode. So even a small amount of money you give will come a long way to help us. And if you have any question with volunteering, how to donate, any other question you might want to ask, can approach us at the booth, or you can refer back to the brochure that we gave you before the Divine Worship started. Okay, now I'll do an activity which is to get you guys into Telegram and WhatsApp channel. So can I get all of you to take out your phone? First will be the Telegram. For those who have Telegram, you can just scan the QR code over here, and you'll just straight away join the Telegram group. And from here, you will receive all the Tree of Life messages and all the other news and contents that we have through that through Telegram. But for those of you who don't have Telegram, you only use WhatsApp. No worries, because you are moving that next. Next will be WhatsApp. How do we get on board? So you see this number, 98680004. Add this number in to your phone book, to your contact number. Save it as Hope Channel Singapore, so it's us that's sending you the message. It works the same way as Telegram. Wherever it goes there, it goes to your WhatsApp too. So once you add your contact, you can just scan this QR code, which is also on the brochure, and just click the word send and you are in. And that's all you need to do. And once again, if you have any question or you need to know how to get on board with this, you can just ask us again at the booth later on, and we'll guide you along the ways, alright? And so I'll pass back to Pastor Johnny.
The Hope Channel is not an independent body. It is to collaborate with all the local churches right here in Singapore. Today is to collaborate with the Filipino church right here. Because we think together as partners in ministry, we can accomplish more. So many of you have different gifts and talents. Many of you can sing, can share, can preach. We were coming up with many more opportunities for you to be participants and to be involved in this Hope Channel Singapore, so that we can be the extended arm and hand of Jesus right here in Singapore to disseminate the information. I want to close by having 2 stories. One, I don't know if you've seen this face before. This is the hero in China. He's a medical doctor, Dr. Li Wenliang. His name is very close to my name, because my Chinese name is Jian Wenliang. Right? His name is Li Wenliang. Same name, in fact. It's different family name, that's all. And I told myself I should never die like that. Right? He was one of the medical doctors working in Wuhan. In the early days in December, he and his colleagues discovered that this virus, this unusual virus, they don't have a name for it, that's why it was called Wuhan virus, because it started in the city, that its transmission is not just from animal to human, but there is a potential observation that is a human-to-human translation. So they had a WeChat group and they began to share the story. Unfortunately, the authority heard news of it and clamped down on them, shut their accounts and asked them to go to the police station and write confession that this is a rumor, this is not true. And he said, okay, we will comply. But in their heart, we need to warn the people of the impending situation, because this thing, once it's not warned, the warning is not early enough, it will become from an epidemic to a pandemic, which is what we have today. Unfortunately, his message was too late to be acknowledged. So when he was silenced, even by the authority, he went back to work as a doctor and he was infected because many of the precautions were not implemented those days. And he died being a hero, the voice for salvation in that sense, in this virus pandemic. But on the other hand, there's another CNN reporter, and he was at Wuhan reporting the situation. And just a few hours before the city went into a total lockdown, his boss from CNN Atlanta, which is the headquarters, asked him, take the last train out of Wuhan and go to Beijing, and then have a self-imposed 14 days of quarantine. So they left Wuhan with their cameras, with the crew. Their job is to report the news, to let the world know, so that more help can be brought forward and more people can be warned, so that precautions and all the necessary measures can be taken to avoid fallen victims to this pandemic. And so they went to Beijing, and you can see actually right at the Beijing hotel, they filmed them for 14 days, 3 of them within a room. They make do with whatever food delivery service. In fact, the food delivery is that they push the food to their door, knock, knock. Then the guy will be gone, Then they open the door, eat the food, whatever. No house cleaning. You can forget it. Then 14 days, it's tough. And then when they finish the food, just leave it at the door, close, call, and then somebody will pick up the food. Minimum contact, almost zero contact. But after 14 days, what amazing to me is this. After 14 days, they had an interview with the CNN headquarters in Atlanta. And the 2 interviewers says that, so are you coming back? He says, no, we are putting on masks. And our crew, we are going out of Beijing. And at that time, Beijing was about to be shut down. Not yet about to be shut down. I said, we're going out to take more news. So why? Why are you doing that? Why are you risking your life? And he says something like, this is my mission. To share with the world of the news. So that they can be better prepared and more help can be brought in. When I saw that news there, I almost had tears. I said, you know what? This guy knows his mission. Do I know my mission? What then is your mission? And so when we come back to Matthew 24 verse 14, when Jesus says, when the gospel is shared to the whole world, then the end shall come. What then is your mission in terms of playing a part in this end time, in sharing the gospel? The Hope Channel Singapore is just one of the ways, not the only way, one of the many platforms that we have established, and we hope in the coming months we can use this platform to generate more interest. They will bring them to your local church. There are so many Filipinos right here in Singapore who have yet to experience the love of Jesus Christ, has yet to understand the full Advent message of this impending Armageddon that we all will go through in these final chapters of Earth history. And what are we doing as a church? I want to, a song. Many of you, maybe the audio, the next one is the song. I heard this song many years ago. It says that, I'm willing, Lord. You know the song? I think it's popularized by the heritage singers back in the 70s. And I think sometimes we are feeling down. Right? You have the virus thing and say, oh, it could be me. Or my travels are affected, my families, I'm concerned with them in Philippines or in different parts of the world. I'm not sure about my work path in the coming months. I'm worried about my children's education right here in Singapore, and the cost of living is getting higher, and you're worried about all these things. And companies sometimes go to retrenchment exercise, reorganization, and there is many insecurities, uncertainties, and apprehension. But you know what? In the midst of all this, if we are allowed to say that, Lord, I'm willing. Sometimes maybe I don't feel that you are around, like the song says. But if I go through the fire, I will come out shining like gold.